Hey,
Yep.
how's it going?
What up, Alex?
Not too much. Got a train by.
I forgot if I mentioned in a prior call, but I landed a job. I start next week.
Oh, for real? Where at? Congrats,
Uh,
by the way.
oh, thank you. Vacasa. So
Um,
yeah, so they're like an Airbnb competitor. Their business model is like slightly different.
I'm gonna search that. What are you doing there? I mean, I
Um,
assume like data or something.
yeah, I mean, I think the official title is more like senior data scientist, just because it's like they're like I don't know. It's just like their internal system, but they're working on some like Gen AI stuff, and so they kind of want to bring me in to like work on that, as well as like there's gonna be inevitably some like more machine learning based stuff apparently too, and so like I'll kind of be hovering that too. I mean, a lot of it is like it's that weird like cat and mouse game that like big companies play where like someone inevitably at the top thinks like, you know, the offshore, an offshore data scientist costs us a third of the price of a US based one. And then inevitably cuts the US team. And then it has troubles because of like overlap, communication, not being able to, no one technical enough able to wrangle the offshore team, and then so they're kind of in this place where they I think they cut like half their US based data scientists and then are now starting to hire US based data scientists. So
Interesting. Yeah. So it's like the main challenge in a role like that, the like infrastructure scale wise, or what do you foresee the challenges?
I think one of the main things is that like when you're in a big company, oh hey, how's it going? Especially in like a big company, when I say big, like Vacasa is still like public, public company, publicly traded company, right? So that's still a pretty big company. Is that
Yeah, I didn't know that. I was thinking startup. Sorry.
yeah. No worries. Is
Vacasa
that
bought
inevitably huh?
Vacasa bought Wyndham, like the big timeshare company. Like Vacasa's getting.
Wait, Vacasa bought Wyndham?
Yeah.
I didn't know they bought Wyndham.
Yeah, that was weird. It was like 2 years ago or something.
For some reason I thought Wyndham was bought by someone else, but yeah, anyways. The problem with like especially these large companies is that very, very often you end up in these projects that are like multi-months long, and then it's just like, okay, because XYZ reason, sometimes it's like an actual one, like the economy shifted or whatever. Oftentimes it's kind of arbitrary. Like, oh, we gotta shelve it. So you end up with a lot of these like ghost projects that happen everywhere. Maybe less so at like a Vacasa versus like if you're at a really big company. Like if you're a really, really big company like I don't know, like a Vanguard or an Oracle, nothing you do matters compares to what like SQL Workbench brings in for Oracle, Yeah.
I mean, kind of, but
Yeah. Basically.
interesting. When do you start?
I start next week, Monday.
Nice. Yeah. So I basically for this call, I think I was waiting for Meb to get here, Mo. But I think we were just going to like dive into what you thought about the conference, which for the record,
Sure.
I'm not even sure what the conference was.
Sure. Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, and then we'll just go from there.
Yeah. Do you want me to just jump into it? I don't really have slides. I'm just gonna ramble if that's cool.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. The call's recorded, just
FYI. Yeah. So for those who don't follow, there's a guy in the I call it the AI engineering, AI agent kind of space. named Swix, who's pretty prominent. He has a pretty popular blog, Latent Space and podcast, where it kind of, he plays a decent role, like curating on the more technical side, like the news, and as well as like having the connections to people working on interesting stuff in that space. And so I believe he's been running this conference for maybe a little over a year now. But so this year, like the AI Engineering Summit, I think so there's run in New York. Originally, it kind of was going to focus around a lot of different aspects of working with LLMs, like multimodality, RAG, whatever. I'd say the interesting brand pivot, even though it's still called AI Engineering Summit, was it was basically undercovers called like agents at work, because a lot of the theme that he mentioned at the top of it was that basically, even though he came into the year pretty skeptical about agents and the branding around it, that a lot of the signs kind of point to like 2025, and quite frankly the years following it being like the year of AI agents, and that it's something that sounds kind of fad like, or like, it's like one of those words, if you've been in AI, you're almost tired of hearing it, kind of like AGI. But that agents have also, at least on the technical side, start to mean things. And especially when you start to break down like what does it actually mean to build a real agent that's actually useful, that isn't just smoke and mirrors and whatnot. So
when you say the year of AI agents, like is that just kind of they flourish out into like niche domains, or like more powerful, or what do you think that means?
I would say like there are certain domains where they've already found product market fit, right? There's pretty obvious ones, like for example, like the chat assistant. Every single company has like put out a chat assistant that's got many thousands, millions of users. I think ChatGPT has a user base now of like 400 million users and is approaching, I mean, at this point, they're on trajectory to hit like 1 billion by the end of the year, which is pretty insane.
Dang. Yeah.
And then so there's other domains now, like code agents. So you got your cursors and your windsurfs, obviously. And then there's like the niches outside of that haven't quite hit, like your Devons, but as well as deep research as a category is starting to blow up now, with like Google having theirs, OpenAI, Perplexity, etc. And then there's some like there's other industries on the fringe that this is starting to work out for too. Pretty notably, I think there was literally a slide that's like, agents plus anything basically works, which is like, the running joke on there was like, have you tried rubbing agents on it? So it's like, agents plus RAG gives you agentic RAG, kind of works. Agent plus code gives you agentic code gen, also works. Finance, marketing, lead gen, all these kind of industries, it kind of works, at least to a varying degree. And then I think some of these industries, I think they probably do work, and you just haven't heard the like, what's it called? They're just more private of companies. Like I know, for example, lead gen and marketing, it's one of those things that it's like something that agents are sneaky good at, but I already know that they're pretty, that agents work in these domains. So yeah.
Are you saying like like startups that haven't really said what they're working on yet?
It's not that they haven't said that they've worked on it. It's just that like there's a difference between like a 2 million ARR startup and a 100 million ARR startup, right? And also it's like, the lead gen and marketing type of domains, they're just not that sexy. You know, like we're gonna hear about Cursor at 2 million ARR way before we're gonna find out about like Daydream doing
I
like
see.
SEO, right? Because like for what it's worth, actually a long time, not that long ago, maybe like 2 years ago, I actually seed invested into Daydream that does programmatic SEO. And so I get the investor updates on that, but they hit 2 million ARR. It's just that it's the non-sexy thing about it is like, how do you capture good value of it early is you do the agency model, which is just like, what's it called? Which is where you're just like, doing marketing, you're doing personal branding, getting inbound, and then like working at, that client relationship. That over time you're building out this like internal tool until it's good enough to be external facing, to be more B2B than the agency model. But that with the agency model, they're able to capture far more of that value. So like right now their clients are paying them 10 grand a month to do like SEO, which is like, if you're getting paid by like a big company to do SEO, that's not crazy. And quite frankly, it's just, are you proficient at doing that kind of work, right? And that if you have the proficiency in that domain plus the proficiency in AI and like with LLMs, and then being able to tie that into an agent, over time that becomes a pretty powerful product. But that, what it kind of starts out is kind of unsexy, which is like a marketing agency, right? Cool. Let me see. So I think there were a couple of like things that I kind of noted as like some key turning points for like why.
As a side note, sorry. I
Yeah,
was trying to highlight some of these problems, like more obscure ones. I'm just going to drop it in chat, but I think I posted it on Farcaster previously. But as we talked about, I think in the original call, like lead gen seemed to be like a big one, like value wise.
Yeah,
I think there's like a ton of things like
let's
that.
say like one thing that like it's an unsexy problem, but like one that is actually pretty good is just building like an AI agent that will do like cold email outreach for you, to be honest. But it's just boring as hell to talk about. No one wants.
Email is unsexy.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, you're getting close to being able to do cold calling with AI agents, but it's just not sexy to talk about.
I think more of like cold, like Farcastering and Twittering, which that may be the wrong approach, or maybe it's just like the mindset that I've grown up with. But yeah, like even our first investor in Rocketer was just like those Twitter DMs. There was no like email or like phone call outreach, I guess.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, it's the use case is pretty ripe for that. And to be honest, there's probably companies killing it in that, but like, the guys who are killing it at cold outreach, they're not splashy companies because they're just quietly infiltrating everyone's DMs, right? DMs, email inboxes, etc. They're not like, it's just a different business model, and so they're probably killing it. You probably just haven't heard of them.
Yeah, at least I have a tendency to wander towards like extravagant ideas or business models to some extent. But I'm trying to walk back from that mindset.
Yeah, I know. I think about that too. Like I was telling Kevin O'Connell about like a splashier idea I had, but I'm just like, it's like, why do you need to make it that complicated?
Yes. Yep. Exactly.
Yeah, it's like just doing mental gymnastics at a certain point. But yeah.
Yeah. Also, there was recently a Carpathy video. I don't even know if it was recent. I think it was like a UC Berkeley pitch competition. But he was basically saying that like all of ChatGPT was derived from them making like a chatbot for Reddit, which like the way he was talking about it sounded like people were just joking about it, and then it like slowly turned into like GPT 1, 2, 3, etc.
that kind of makes sense to me. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying to also like not get discouraged by side projects.
Yeah. So anyways, a couple of key highlights that I kind of thought about for like especially why agents now. One statistic that popped up that was pretty jaw-dropping for me, but it's like that the cost of GPT-4 level intelligence has dropped 1,000 times in the last year and a half. So you have this time where, for example, the model intelligence is is still going up as after hitting like your wall with like your GPT-4s with the more traditional LLM approach, and it's starting to tick up again with these reasoning models. And as more of them come out, and as there are more real competitors to like OpenAI coming out too, with your like DeepSeeks, your QNs, etc., that the cost of these models is getting infinitely cheaper. And even to some degree too is also the cost of inference is also improving. Like the speed of inference is improving on top of these like actual reasoning models, and LLMs also getting cheaper.
Are reasoning models actually speeding up on inference? Is that a thing?
It's hard to say on specifically reasoning models, just because like the idea of a reasoning model is so new.
Yeah, it's probably like we're trying to make it think longer at the same time.
Right. But
maybe like accelerating quicker.
Right. But the speed at which we are processing tokens at inference time is like it's like maybe 10 times better. And I can't even tell you like the time period of that, but it's getting better. Yeah.
For everyone else here, if you're not familiar, one of the big things of R1 was the cost of inference. Basically, the amount of RAM required to do inference went down because they have like MOE architecture, which is just like little experts in the model. But that was like a pretty big thing. I think one of the things that I'm like hoping eventually gets solved is not having to load the entire model into RAM. I'm pretty sure you still have to do that with like all models. So like kind of your only optimizations for that type of thing is like quantization or something.
Yeah, I mean,
it's like 200. Let's say it's like 200 gigabytes of RAM to load the entire model, and then maybe it's like, I don't know, 10 gigabytes to like run inference or something.
Yeah, I mean, there's probably stuff you can do on like distillation with LoRa's, but yeah, it's a good point. Let me see. So okay, so that's the high level for like kind of like why agents now, and like why, even though it feels like a loaded term in like the AI world, it's not super lofty. It's not a crazy hype term that, like, to be honest, that even like AI used to be like, I used to not take people who said AI versus machine learning seriously in the past, to be honest, because it tells you what direction that presentation is going to go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like deep learning was the whole thing on top of like machine learning, if I recall as well. Like in terms of terminology and like the level of seriousness applied to it.
Right. But every like every piece to it has its day, and I think right now like agents are having their time in the sun, and it's actually in a weird way underhyped. So let me talk through some other things. I'm gonna just come through this one piece really quick. For some reason, VCs are really their interest is peaking in like voice models. Because like you have your, I think Gemini had a big splash with their Super Bowl ad with their like voice assistant model that someone was talking to with their phone, and so VCs are like, I don't know. I talked to a lot of founders, and then they're all kind of saying this one thing where like their investor just randomly out of the blue, like the past 2 weeks, just asked them like, so what are you doing about voice? And and then to kind of give you the long and short of it, it's like voice, if you're technical about it, all of voice right now, except for like a handful of cases, is still just a whisper wrapper, where it's still one abstraction away from feeding text into an LLM, because you're still translating you're still doing the translating work from a voice file to text, right? And that at the end of the day, that's just one level of abstraction for you to make errors in processing what you're saying. So
yeah,
yeah.
I was recently experimenting with like trying to do kind of a hybrid language with like English and math, and like one of the first things I realized was I can't like speak this. So yeah, that's like a big thing.
Yeah.
Also, one of the side notes for voice, like actually, it's the only thing that excites me in voice is the ability to get like unique characters in audiobooks. As like a kid, I used to listen to the radio, like book storytelling things, and they all had like unique character voices. But anyways, that's like very exciting to me. But the whole like VC voice paradigm hasn't like.
Yeah, and like there's a handful of places I think like Meta and Zuckerberg have been talking about like actual voice to voice models where you're no longer like doing character character based training and like prediction of next character or word, but actually using like wavelength files as your like input. But like there are very few companies that are serious in that space, and to be honest, like VCs don't know better when they're talking about like what are you doing with voice. And so when most people when that ever comes up, most of the time they're really talking about like whisper model wrappers. And if you kind of missed the point before, especially as more of these open AI competitors become serious, like more than just Anthropic, that if anything, the wrapper companies are actually worth something. Used to be a joke, but there's power to the whisper wrappers. Okay, so I just wanted to touch on that a little bit. Actually, another quick point I wanted to kind of hang. This might be for some people this might be a sore topic, but probably not so much for anyone here. But RAG, if you are building bespoke RAG implementations, pivot. In my opinion.
What is bespoke in this case?
What I mean is like if you are spending too much time like hyper optimizing your RAG implementations, don't. It's not worth your time. Because the tech, even just seeing how it's played out over time, like a little while ago, if you wanted to do a very common use case was like I want to take my PDF and then ask it a question, right? Like ask my book a question, ask my PDF a question. Now, for a lot of those cases, especially if your book isn't that long, you're just about as good. You're just as well off just translating it in OCR and then fitting it into a giant context window with Gemini 2.0 Flash, and then asking the question. Like that's what I mean. Is that
right. I've seen this come up a couple times.
Yeah. So between context windows getting bigger and then models being able to cover a larger search space over time, that your super bespoke, RAG implementation is over time going to not really be worth your time and effort. Of course, there's what's it called? There's edge cases, obviously. Like sometimes like, the little pushover you need is just like that slight optimization you're able to get in your RAG implementation. But for the average person that's working with like, trying to feed knowledge to an agent, it's almost not worth your time.
Yeah, I think it was you that maybe said it, but Gemini was like really good at finding needles in the haystack.
That was me, and then I went into that a little deeper. Yeah.
Is there
the one thing I
thing? Okay, like I've seen people trying to, I guess, build some like off-the-shelf open source RAG kind of protocol-y kind of deals. Because it would be cool just to like plug agents into like some known library, but I feel like so much of the RAG stuff is like you're manually like using LangChain or LangGraph or something like that. Like, is there something better? Because Eliza has like a pretty cool like agentic RAG implementation. It would be neat if it was abstracted in such a way that I could just like point other things to it. But and then
I mean that's why I kind of point to like if you're using when I say relatively small, I'm saying like 1 million characters or less, right? You know, something that still fits into a single prompt, like context window with a Gemini 2.0 is that if it's not hugely important, I would just do that. I would currently replace a lot of what used to be covered in the RAG world with just like a long context window with Gemini 2.0, which is a lot simpler than like, you know, processing your text, doing like OCR, you know, chunking to like ADA embeddings, putting it in a RAG vector database, and then doing calls to the vector database. It's way simpler to just tokenize, feed it to a giant context window with like Gemini 2.0, and then just, you know, have Gemini 2.0 ask a question over that giant context window.
Is there any type of like cost comparison that exists for this?
There probably is. I'm just not super deep down that. I'm not super deep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dean, what are you like looking for in a RAG framework? Like when I think of RAG, all I'm thinking of is like generating the embedding and like cosine search.
So like on the order of like 2 to 10 terabytes of data or something. Like I want like a lot of books, a lot of information, a lot of just other things and descriptions of things, and sort of the way that agentic RAG is done in like Eliza is kind of cool because I have like descriptions to help guide the vector searches and everything. And it would be cool if there was something that, you know, you could just say, you know, here's the amount of storage that I have, fill up my RAG and then like prune it appropriately maybe. So then if you put in more training data, then like it kind of trims out the stuff that it hasn't used. And then it's just kind of a good abstraction for that.
What, when you say Eliza has descriptions, like I really haven't used the Eliza like RAG system, or really the memory system too much at all, but what like, yeah, what are the descriptions in this case that you're saying? Like it's an LLM call that guides like a RAG search? Or
yeah, I can't remember the details on it, but like beyond just the chunks, like for every chunk there's also kind of a reasonable description of like what that chunk is about or something, so that kind of assists in the vector search.
If you want, Dean, I can send you a video that my friend did, because he went really deep down. What the problem is, it's building your own bespoke like chunking system and whatnot, but like kind of depends on what you need from it, and like maybe like offline if you want to describe what your if you want to describe like what it is you're trying to extract out of that, I'll call it what, 3 terabytes of data, then I can try to help a little bit. I think, to be honest, that gets to a different point that I harped on last week, which is like, you know, evals is everything. Because a lot of what's it called? A lot of what you are really looking for when you're, you know, building your first prototype, and then as well as monitoring it over time, really comes down to evals, right? It's you know, figuring out what questions are, you know, like what interactions are happening with my agent, and how well is it fulfilling on that, I guess, on that transaction, because it's not always a conversation, but like how well is it answering that question, for example, in that time period. And then that also kind of comes into the space of what, like when I'm fetching something or when I'm answering a question that is relevant to the data that's in that 2 terabyte file, right? What are typically the kinds of questions that would be coming up, right? And that also informs you a little bit about what you need to distill from that 2 terabyte file, right? Because there's some aspects to RAG where like you would almost have like a distillation of different chunks. So let's say, because you're not usually just like doing a straight search over a 2 terabyte like space of data, but that you have certain chunks that represent certain sections, and that you have a distillation, like a summary of what that chunk represents. And then that has some like keywords to tell you like, oh, you know, if I'm looking for XYZ, that you want to look for it in this chunk, right? And that you
I
can
think
kind of, yeah.
there's
Go
like
ahead.
a term like annotated descriptions or something. I'm pretty sure
Yeah.
that there's like research papers on this a bit if you want to dig into that.
Yeah. It'd be cool if there was just like a simple interface where you could, you know, call like the learn function and then throw any data at it, like a PDF or whatever, and then it would figure all that out on the back end and then like put it into this blob or whatever. And then like a recall function where you just like give it some snippet of a thing and then it fills you with as much context as you want. Like, you know, give me, you know, 1 million tokens of context of this thing here that I'm going to give you, and then it just kind of expands it out to whatever like window you want, and then you can use that to like throw it in and just have like just kind of like a generic RAG interface that then other smart academic-y people can like figure out how to optimize like the back end stuff of like, you know, when to do like, you know, whatever, like the cache and validation, like all the fancy cool stuff you can do on the back end in there. And then other people that just want RAG that works can just plug it in and then like get the upgrades as they move up.
Bespoke RAG as a service.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I want there to not be people building bespoke tech also. Like I want there to be a standard that people just kind of figure out and then, you know.
Well, that's my point though, is that a lot of the need for, you know, iterating on like RAG systems is just getting iterated away by like bigger context windows and being able to search over a larger search space better. So that like, you know, the RAG as an, you know, the RAG implementation itself, and, you know, having to build, I guess, like I'll call it a framework around building RAG systems is getting less and less necessary, right? So that's why I think, I mean, I'm sure, I just don't know the companies, right? I'm sure there are companies building in that space, right? You know, building like some form of RAG as a service or something.
I want 16-year-old kids building in that space. Like I don't want companies like gating access and shit. Like I want it to be like an open source thing that I can pull down from GitHub and then tell it how much data that I want to use, and then tell it, you know, I don't know if it would automatically figure out like the speed of my storage or whatever, like, you know, tell it the storage solution I want and then have it just figure all that out, and then whatever my API, then I just like, you know, recall and learn. Like those are the only things that I want from a RAG. But
yeah,
that'd be cool. Also, there's a couple
Mo-
voice-to-voice things that I just threw links to in there, but Moshi.chat is really silly and it will start making weird honking noises at you when you talk to it. But apparently Sesame is pretty cool too.
Mo is asking if any of us are familiar with knowledge graphs. I really haven't worked with graph DBs too much. It's like on my radar. And like to my understanding, knowledge graph is just kind of like a very heavily semantically influenced graph DB. I could be wrong on that, but I haven't worked with it yet. Just like maybe in the next month or two.
yeah, I haven't gone deep into it either, but I do know that like people are experimenting with like graph RAG agents. So I don't know.
Well, I think
Yeah,
Google's knowledge graph has been around for like almost 15, 20 years or something. And that's kind of been the thing that they've been using to power a lot of their search stuff and make it really cool. And the idea that they have that knowledge graph that they constantly curate, I think, is one massive win for Gemini, because it's like this frequently updated thing. And if they can RAG against it, then, you know, they, you know, always know like the age of what someone is. Then you don't have to rely on, you know, whatever was in the training data. But
to clarify, I'm very excited about it. Like looking forward to it. Just haven't done the work yet.
Yeah, same.
I don't know if
Yeah, I'm
Google
just
gives
kinda-
access to a knowledge graph, but that would be kind of cool. Like, I don't know how that works, but
Yeah, I was just gonna ask guys, yeah, because I was looking at it and trying to wrap my head around it. So I mean, as I'm seeing now from the research, it's just sort of like on taxonomy, right? Like you start from the root, you have subcategories, subcategories, then you have like relationships between the different entities. And so I guess like from what I'm seeing now in the papers, it's just like a way to query this graph and return information rather than just depending on like semantic matching for a specific chunk, basically. But yeah, I'm just like really curious if anybody's like, you know, worked with any specific commercial applications of knowledge graphs in particular.
Usually,
Devin on Farcaster is doing a bit with it. It's not like the most advanced system, but just like having looked at it, it seems very useful. My personal interest with it is to make custom like semantic connections with the relations between nodes. Yeah, just like utilizing LLMs to kind of go to a slightly more advanced level than you would be able to with just like a straight up the relation is alike or something.
Cool.
yep. Let me see. Let me get to frameworks, just because that's something that kind of comes up a lot. Unless Dean, if we wanted to talk a little more about RAG later, I just wanted to like breeze over some other notes I had from conference. So frameworks. Let's see. If you look everywhere you look, there's kind of a new framework coming out like every couple of weeks. I think like especially I guess in like production systems. I think lately pedantic AI has been one that's kind of come out, which is still different than the pedantic Python library that just gives you static typing in Python. Obviously like LangGraph, Crew AI, those have all like kind of existed for a while. What I've kind of found for the most part is almost all these frameworks are worth ignoring. are worth ignoring. It's the problem with almost all of these frameworks is that you are narrowing your purview of what you're trying to do. So, for example, if you're trying to build a personality-based Twitter bot, then you know that's what Eliza is, to be honest, and then that's what it's great for. But if you're trying to push the boundaries of it, the framework lock-in is not worth your time, almost always. And that's just, you know, that's one example. And this is basically across the board what you kind of have to think about with all of these new frameworks. I would say the notable ones I would give are that LangGraph is easy to get started. So like if you're trying to build a basic agent and then also visualize, you know, what's happening with the agent as it's going from like one node to the next, it's very helpful for that, right? But once you get past the proof of concept, it stops being that useful as far as like LangGraph goes. Then there's like high level, there's a MCP model context protocol. I'll get to that later. That's maybe the only thing I would really truly consider. And then outside of that, I met a Columbia professor that was at the conference who does company called Arclex AI. Very specifically, if you're building a Shopify customer service bot, the fact that it naturally has the integration to Shopify, just use it. You probably don't want to custom build that yourself. Otherwise, and it also actually has an interesting like RAG starter kit built into it, which is nice. Other than that, almost all of these other frameworks are just like modes of lock-in, is what I've kind of learned. And I'll reiterate from another call that I forgot who was the last. I don't think it was the last one, but another one I did before. But at a high level, what you kind of think about is that if you boil down like these different frameworks, the through line between all of these like agentic frameworks is that they're all basically built on top of the foundation of Python pedantic or JavaScript TypeScript. And at the end of the day, it's like you have a dynamic language at the, a dynamic commonly used language at the bottom with some type safety. And that typically you're using like Pythonic frameworks if you're touching any sort of database, which is why almost all production level agents are Python based and not TypeScript based, versus like your Elizas are TypeScript because you're interacting with the web primarily and very rarely actually touching a real like database. if you're having to touch like a database of like names and sensitive information via APIs, you're probably using something Python, but that might change over time. But for most of those, if you're ever having to touch like a real like sensitive data store that's like a relational data store, you're probably going to use Python. Otherwise, like if you're doing like a Farcaster or Twitter bot, the TypeScript ones are fine. Any questions with that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I'm not really familiar with pedantic. Is that just like adding types to Python?
Yes. The whole package is just type safety in Python, because Python is dynamically typed. And so it gives you the static typing that you would need in certain circumstances.
One more question after Mo. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll just gonna ask Jason. So you said like if you're touching production databases, that'll be in Python. Like, can't reconcile that. Why is that?
It's because the connectors are like there's less code that you're having to work with to do that database connection. If you're working with a more of like a backend type language like Python compared to more of a front end language like JavaScript.
Okay.
That's basically what it comes down to. I'd say the major annoyance that you would maybe flip-flop over that is like, I mean, outside of like having to deal with Docker because of like package dependencies, but the major thing that you would maybe consider flip-flopping over is doing any like asynchronous calls. Is that if you're having to do asynchronous calls, TypeScript handles async calls way better than like anything you're trying to custom build in Python.
Interesting. Like, can you elaborate on like a comparison, I guess, between async and Python and TypeScript? I thought they were like basically equal in that sense.
Let me see. I haven't done like a comparison between the two. It's just that like, let me see. It's like Python's not like, let me think about this.
I don't mean to put you on the spot too.
It's just like I've never really had to, or you very rarely are put in a spot to try to build like async calls in Python. It's just not usually a need. It's like usually yeah.
Fair enough. Okay, for the LangChain stuff, I'm like moderately familiar with LangChain in the sense that it just made calling different LLMs easier, or at least that's like my understanding of it. What is LangGraph like for?
LangGraph is just it's kind of a spin to LangChain. It's just you're better able to visualize like
Okay.
it actually has an interface for you to like see all the connectors without like custom code. Yeah. See, cool. Let's see. I mentioned model context protocol. So this was introduced by Anthropic toward the end of last year. To be honest, it's a fancy term to just say like, it's not different than what APIs are to like what you would use an API call for, or like an API to like access data, for example. So similar to like, universalizing the access point to say like to data, so that you're making it universal. You're not having to like custom build a connector for this application or that application. But also you're not having to worry about like PII leakage if you say have addresses, for example, in that data store. But because it's at the end of the day, it's a protocol, right? And so model context protocol is just saying like, hey, there should be a protocol or framework for how we think about tools, recurring use of prompts and our models and the interfaces between them. And as far as like model context protocol goes, that's really how you have to just think about it. It's not much more complicated than that. Like you might get confused when like anyone talking about model context protocol talks about like, oh, spinning up your own server for something. It's like if you ever had to build an API, it's like sometimes you just have to build like a random microservice to host that interface so that if someone so that whenever someone tries to hit that API, that there's some data coming back or information coming back about that API. That's all. So as far as frameworks go, yeah, that's the only one that's really worth considering, at least in my purview.
I'm not following like totally.
Yeah.
Like, okay, when am I using model context protocol? I know I should like read the blog and stuff on it.
So
But
I would say this. It's like anytime your agent system becomes more than just, I'll call it two agents. Because and the reason why I say two is because a lot of times your single agent system really becomes an agent and then your evaluator agent. And I'll get into that later. That's going to be very common just because you're not going to be able to scale human in the loop forever, just because you don't have OpenAI resources to like hire all of Africa to like review all of your model calls. And then yeah, all right, see you later. And so let me see, where was I getting at? So anytime it gets to more complicated than like, let's say that two agent system, you're going to have a point where multiple agents are calling on the same things. So you have like multiple agents calling the same vector database, multiple agents calling on the same, like, I don't know, like customer or like CRM database. You're going to have your like system prompts or something stored somewhere other than like hard coded into your system, right? And so it's just it's just starting to standardize how you think about all of those calls that get made as an agent in an agentic system.
okay, I'm like kind of following, but I definitely need to read more on it.
It's something that will take some time to like contextualize. But the main thing that you really need to kind of ground yourself on after a certain point is that like a code base is to an API as like your like agent, and all the things touching it are to model context protocol. And that's all it really is. Cool. Any other questions? I know that's probably went over a lot of people's head. Still goes over my head a little bit. So
I have a question about MCP actually. I've been looking into it. So as I understand, it's sort of like a discoverability layer, right? Like my agent can talk to software, see the features that are available and interact with that software. What's sort of like the frontier between MCP and like a tool that's coded, that's built in your system, that has like the type definitions, and then the agent decides to invoke that tool? Is MCP really there for kind of like just in time, shall we say, compilation of tools, rather than having them defined ahead of time?
I would say it's like if you've ever like prototyped some sort of like basic application, right? So like if you attach a basic like SQLite database to something, to your application, so that you have some form of database that you can work with, that'll work for a little bit. But at a certain point, you might need to like have a little more memory, or like maybe that database needs to touch other applications. And so, at the small scale, which is why I mentioned when it's multi-agent is when it matters most. And if I'm being honest, multi-system, sometimes other things other than agents are going to be touching your vector database. I don't have an exact example for you right now, but anytime it gets to a point where you have to standardize how systems are interacting with that point is when it helps to standardize it across like a protocol or a framework, right? And how systems would interact with that system. That's all. So like if you're making like a proof of concept or like a completely isolated agent with like maybe like a single a singular RAG instance that's purpose made for that agent, you know, forget MCP. Like just use like, you know, straight OpenAI documentation with like with the tool calls you need and the prompts built in, right? And you'll be fine. It's just that when you start to have agents working, you know, more than just that one agent, right, in isolation, that you start to have like an environment of agents working in, you know, working in the same data spaces, and like you're starting to have like template prompts that also are used in different different shared arenas, that you want that to be shared and made available across all of your agents, not just the one.
Yeah, see as well. Personally, I still struggle to like identify what an agent is, in the sense that, yeah, I don't really wrap my head around multiple agents in a single project. I more think of like the project itself as the agent. So it's like one of my shortcomings, I guess.
I would say this is just that, like, I think before I went to the conference, I thought, for example, that I thought, for example, too, that like a lot of use cases you can kind of solve with a single agent. And what I realized is that like right now, the ability of agents is still lacking, especially if you're talking about a general purpose agent. When you're talking about general purpose agent, right now, it's really a cluster of like a routing agent or a manager and niche agents working under that manager, right? So like, let's say I'm having an agent write blog posts about my company, right? So what that really is it's not one agent that's doing that. It would do very poorly at that, in fact, because you would actually break it up into its separate tasks that can be that each one has their own evaluation criteria on, and then also even have some sort of LLM agent of some sort that's evaluating that at, you know, separate to that too. And so that would kind of be broken down to the aspects of, you know, one agent that's researching, one agent that's like blowing out an outline, one agent that's actually writing the blog post, one agent that's editing the blog post, an agent that's reviewing the output of the writing blog post, you know, of the writer, and then one that's kind of gatekeeping at the managerial level before it's actually good enough to actually go out into the wild, right? After a certain point, these agent systems get to be pretty multi-agent and complex. And that the problem is also that like a lot of these agents have overlapping touch points with each other. And so in those cases, you would want to have a protocol like model context protocol that abstracts away the, you know, having to build out that connector for all of these different agents that you're building.
So is it like instances of a agent like, so for example, I guess if I have multiple instances of Eliza, that would be multiple agents?
For sure, yeah. I think like Eliza, for example, is one agent. Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
Okay.
And in that case,
maybe I'm a little.
Yeah, if you're building an Eliza bot, forget anything I'm talking about with multi-agent systems in MCP. I'll just start there, right? Eliza is one bot, is one agent. But that as you try to make your Eliza bot like multimodal between like, I want my Eliza bot to like, you know, be a decent reply guy. I also want it to like research the internet. I also want it to draw me stuff. It's going to be, quite frankly, you know, it's going to be single agent. It's just not going to be very good at any one in particular of those tasks. It's going to
and
be
then,
very mediocre for a
do
lot
we
of.
get to like swarms when it's like, here's my reply guy agent that's like replying to my post agent, and like
Yep.
the overall goal is just to make better content?
Yep.
Okay.
I was
That's
I was just gonna say, like, looking at it, it just, I mean, that word you said, that, like, swarms, I think that's what it's about. It's sort of like, workflows. So what are we trying to do? What's the things we're trying to talk to? And then agents across each step that are just like really good at performing that specific step, right? And so as Jason mentioned, if you expect one agent to do the whole thing, it's just going to get lost in context and have sort of like a very medium result. There's one thing I've been looking at recently. I know like recently we were talking about, well, fine tuning isn't worth it. Just use like the generalized LLMs. With all the things that we're seeing about distillation, like these kind of very small models that can perform very well as specific tasks, I'm wondering, what are you thinking of like saying, well, it's sort of like in the old school software development, right? Sort of like write everything in one language, and then once you want performance gains in one subsystem, maybe write that in Rust or some other high performance language, right? And so I'm wondering here, like, if in terms of these agentic swarms, what do you think in terms of like specialized models as part of the swarm? Just to certain nodes.
Yeah. To be honest, for most people, like if you're talking in the space of like Eliza type of agents, not interesting.
Yeah, no way.
Where it gets particularly interesting is Internet of Things. So where you can't fit, let's say you can't fit an O1 model onto a Raspberry Pi, right? But
Yeah.
you can fit the distilled model onto a Raspberry Pi. That becomes very interesting. And I think there was one guy who was kind of talking in stuff that went way over my head. But basically, that you have these, especially if you go down the LoRa rabbit hole, and I don't remember the exact breakdown of what LoRa spells out, but basically it's just like a small model that punches above its weight, that of what it represents from a lot of the bigger models. But that, like, especially as you talk about building these purpose-built, fine-tuning a purpose-built model, I think his case, he was talking about like one that's really just good at tool use, for example, and then fitting that on a Raspberry Pi, just thinking about what you could do with that. I'm not creative enough to think about what I can do with that on the robotics space. But that starts to be really interesting as to that design space, as you can fit a more and more capable model into a smaller and smaller device, right? More than just your ability to fit like a reasoning model onto an iPhone, but like, like a logic model into a teddy bear, right? So that's kind of, where what I kind of took away from that, although it's still kind of like a niche topic, if I'm being honest.
I'm very excited about like many models and niche models. I think there's going to be more like foundational model. I don't even know if foundational model is the right word, but like breakthroughs in training new models versus just fine tuning. So like fine tuning is cool. I think there is like some diminishing returns to like continuing to fine tune models. But yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, yeah. I don't know what right word is fine tuning. I don't think so. But yeah, as just these specialized models, that's like something like a couple billion parameters, and it just, I don't know, like extracts data and converts it to a camera event for a tool call, right? So just like kind of identifying parts of our process on this workflow and then delegating those. But then, as you mentioned, for most cases, like GPT out of the box works really well. This is only like really worth it once you've got a process that's running. But that said, like, I guess if you're in a self-hosted environment, then you would definitely have an interest to, maybe not self-hosted, but like if you just want to like remove those tokens, you could have an interest in like having a pool of models that do some things very well and just tap into those. But that requires having a certain volume of things happening for it to be worth it.
Yeah. Although I think there's some niche cases that come up there was a video I posted, I think a week ago, that at a high level was, I think I was talking about like web use, like state of the art web use models that, state of the art web use models that use something called like Monte Carlo tree search, but embedded into that study, they were actually talking about tool use of bigger models versus smaller models on a deterministic space, like doing math, because it's very easy to tell if a model was right or wrong with a basic math equation. But one thing that you can kind of do in that space is, if your model is sufficiently big enough, and say like 7 billion parameters up, which is still tiny in comparison to like a massive reasoning model, is that it's faster, and B, it's multiples cheaper to call on that model. But basically, you can kind of have it self evaluate on its answer enough times to the point that the loop of, say, like 3 self calls checking your work in a chain of thought way on a smaller model outperforms the single call on the bigger model.
Yeah, I feel like outperforming the larger model is like the really important thing. Distillation sweet too, like at least for embeddings, it's like 99.8% quality retained, or like some insane number, like maybe down to 98%, or like at worst.
Yeah. I'm just kind of pointing out that, like, for example, with these
I'm sorry, quantized, not distillation.
Yeah. Like, fine tuning is one avenue, but also even just having a sufficiently large enough small model that is many times cheaper and many times faster to call, that like perhaps you could, one option is to like create a chain where it's just self-evaluating over a certain call, so that you're over indexing on the accuracy for a fraction of the cost of like a reasoning model call, for example.
Yeah, not
And
to be
latency, right?
Huh?
I'm saying and latency, because I guess that's the issue. Like some of these other models, like if you're building like interactive experience, so if it's like running in a cron somewhere doing its thing, fine, right? But when you're doing like interactive experience with a human being on the other end,
Right.
5, 10, 15-second wait time, it just doesn't cut it.
Right. So what I'm saying is, yeah, because the latency too, and on top of the cost itself, is quicker, that there are some times where like the 3 self calls evaluating on itself is still comes out faster than like a reasoning model call, which is pretty awesome. Cool. So anyways, that kind of covers the high level topics that were my takeaways from that conference.
What was the conference name again?
AI Engineering Summits.
Hopefully they have like some of their. It sounds like it was super worthwhile.
Also, like, to be honest, like they have the entire streams of
yeah,
the first 2 days up. Like I think some of the workshop calls you may not be able to get, in particular Solana's one. you can't really get, but like the 2 days of main stage talks are like 9 hours streamed, which you can kind of skip through the breaks. It's there too. Yeah.
Okay, sweet.
So I'm curious if anyone's been following the Shaw's streams that he's been doing. Because he's been doing these crazy like 10, 11-hour streams every day for the past week or so on like ELIZA V2 hacking. So I feel like he wakes up and like starts streaming and then starts like drooling on the computers. Like, like
he's in his wartime arc.
Yeah, it's insane. But
I'm familiar. I haven't watched any of them, and I've like asked a couple times in the like Farcaster agent dev group chat thing, like for the ELIZA people, if anything was coming out of V2 yet, but nobody's responded. So
I think like,
I'm not sure if it's just like slight minimization or like less code overall, or what's going on with it.
I think there's like a concept of inventory, like the agents have stuff, and then there's like some other abstractions. I was trying to like get Gemini to tell me about the YouTubes, because Gemini has a pretty good comprehension of what goes on any given YouTube video. And so even for like the massively long ones,
Nice.
it's pretty good at like, you just give it like high level summary, and then it'll tell you, you can watch this at, hour 5 minute, like 18, whatever. This is where he talks about this.
Do you just like give it the link?
I've got a little button in my YouTube that is like a little Gemini button that I just click and then talk to it.
Okay.
I don't know if it's because I've got a bunch of like lab stuff enabled on Gemini. It might even be like, I feel like it's mostly on mobile that I see it, and like it's not on every video, but
I think, yeah, and technically, I think you can also access it in Gemini, like Chat Studio, which is just the chat app for Gemini. I think you literally just at YouTube and then pass it the link and ask it a question.
Yeah.
Although it's not going to answer it all the time. So I think, to be honest, I've like had mixed results with that. And then on some small occasions, I'll have to just copy paste the transcript and throw it in the giant context window and then have it summarized. That's like last resort, but it's got one of the biggest context windows, so it can handle that too.
Yeah, I feel like I've been sleeping on Gemini a little bit, but that's usually what I do. I just like paste the transcript into whatever.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure, but I feel like sometimes it does do like visual stuff also. So it's like not just ingesting the transcript, like not just from what it's saying, but we'll actually like get the screenshots, get the whatever, and then
yeah, that seems like a big unlock.
Yeah.
To your ELIZA point, I like just don't even find the whole using like tokens, and I mean I assume inventory is like NFTs and stuff, because it's like kind of a crypto thing, but I don't know, I just like haven't found that very interesting. It seems more like, almost always it seems like a gimmick to me, like let's launch a token and then it holds the token. But it's like obviously the dev just has the key, or
yeah.
What do you think about it?
I have this vision of a world where people are talking to kind of, medium dumb agents for the most part, and paying small amounts of money to it, and those small agents like collect small amounts of money, and then when there's like a harder problem, then like the smaller agents will call up to the more intelligent agents that are more expensive, and they'll figure out like when the right time is to talk to who. And
what do you think like the value prop would be over me, like for example just talking to the like base mod, like GPT or whatever?
Well, then any given human only has one point of contact that they need to talk to, and that agent then knows the other agents to talk, and that agent will talk to the other agent on their own, and then pass the information forward to the human.
Okay.
So
yeah, I kind of see what you're saying. Maybe what I'm more getting at is I don't feel like any of the agents have actually surpassed that like knowledge barrier or whatever. Yeah. But yeah, I guess it's like kind of the society of agents or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, because you've got like, with the like GPT 4.5, I guess is very expensive to run, and even some of like the O3, when you have it think for a long time, is apparently like ridiculous to run. I guess like people were saying that from some of the benchmarks, it was costing like over $1 million of compute just to run the benchmark or whatever, for some of the stuff that like O3 was doing. But yeah, so like,
but you're saying like the entire benchmark for O3? Or
it was the what was it, the ArcAGI whatever benchmark, that big benchmark that they did very well on.
Gotcha.
Somebody did the
I'm not really familiar with them, but that's insane if it's I mean, I guess maybe it makes sense.
You said with Arc?
Yeah,
Like
I think someone did the math on it, and I guess to run it through that benchmark just like one time costs like over $1 million of compute, supposedly.
Is it Snake Bench?
It was the ArcAGI thing.
Yeah, I know. The aforementioned friend who with the chunking video, he's the president of Arc Prize.
Cool.
So I think they've been. I didn't see that post about it, costing like $1 million of calls to like run it through that benchmarking.
I think it was
But
extrapolated from some of the white papers because it said like how much it costs for like the full benchmark for some of the smaller models, and like it was maybe like whatever a few $1,000s, and then it said like the smaller tests, and then like you charted on the line of like if it costs O3 this much to go through the smaller tests, and then they did go through the bigger tests, then it probably would have cost whatever. But yeah, and like the idea is like most things that humans want to know, you don't need to be talking to like a super intelligent whatever being to get the answer to. It's like, what's the weather going to be or whatever else. Like, but if you have like this hierarchy of agents that know what other agents to talk to pass information along, then you could develop like this sort of economic system of agents paying agents to have conversations and everything else. I don't know. It could be interesting.
Infinite backrooms with micropayments.
Yeah, so no human actually gets to directly talk to the super intelligent being in the sky. It's you got to go through like 5 layers of whatever. But I don't know. Or maybe it just costs like $1 million a minute, and so like only like insane people do it. But when it needs to happen, it can happen, and be neat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, Alex, you're on mute, by the way.
My bad. I was saying this has always kind of been like a fascinating concept since I read Society of Mind, like turning or utilizing like human hierarchies in organizations kind of as a layer for AI as well. But that's like a I don't know if the right word is like soft idea or whatever. Outside of that, I don't know if you guys have seen the DLLM thing, the like diffusion LLM. Those kind of cool recently. Obviously, like typical LLMs are like left to right token generation. Diffusion is all at once, and it like slowly removes static. But it's way faster for inference from what I read, and it seems to be comparable. I think it was with 4.0 Mini in terms of results, but it's like it was something crazy, like 10 times faster.
Oh, that's for text. Okay.
For
diffusion for like making images or what, like stable diffusion.
Yeah, right. So this is like the first time that it's been applied to an LLM, basically. Yeah, Carpethy was really excited about it.
Okay. Well, then it's probably pretty cool then.
Yeah, right. I haven't tried it or anything, but the big thing was it was like way faster inference.
It's kind of funny that I forgot the company name behind Stable Diffusion already. That's how much it's changed over time.
Yeah,
like Labs or something.
Weirdly, I remember the CIO is like Imad Mustaq.
Yeah, I thought he like pivoted from another startup. Like
he talked to DevCon in Bangkok.
Yeah, weirdly, I cannot for the life of me remember the base company's name.
Stability.
Stability. That's right.
Stability AI.
God, it's been so long since they've been mentioned.
Well, I think Imad left, and
I haven't followed
something. Yeah, because I mean, I think he'd always had this vision of like a decentralized whatever kind of AI stuff, and I don't know what he's done there, but he remotely talked to DevCon, like he what is it, like dialed in or something. But yeah, he is mostly talking about making sure that the compute was in the hands of the people and everything else, like good stuff. But yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know if he's still like stealth mode on something or what, but he went somewhere and is doing something. And I am also very interested in like decentralized AI stuff, so I would like to know what he's doing. I don't think he's working with like Morpheus or any of the other like things that I'm aware of.
What is Morpheus?
Let's see. Wait. Yeah. More.org. Let's see, here we go. Here we go.
Also, I'm gonna probably drop in a bit. Anything anyone want to talk more about for the topics I brought up earlier from, or at least the talking points I brought up earlier?
You mentioned like the voice thing, doing like wave files or something as the input directly. What would the value of that be? Or is it just like an easier multimodal input? Like maybe I'm asking like what would the value of inputting an image be, which probably isn't like a
it's one less layer of abstraction. It's like, you know, similar to how like an image model is really just looking at pixels, right?
Yeah, it can capture like tones and stuff.
And then kind of it's realistically it's just like relationally one pixel against another pixel, and then like, you know, you're able to capture some form of like patterns from that, whether it's like, you know, a curve or like a point, for example, as like a basic example. Similar to that, it's just one less layer of abstraction of going from, I guess, the characters to the meaning behind the characters back to the characters. And then on top, well, that's just, that's even just describing text, but going from voice file, transcribe, you know, meaning you're just cutting out that middle layer of translating it to the characters.
I'm like thinking that means it can, like if I'm yelling at GPT or something, it's capturing that versus just like translating it straight up.
Yeah, that's what it would do. Yeah.
And it'll catch accents and like subtle things like that, and like and
oh yeah, that's interesting. Like
that's true.
or secondary English learners or whatever.
Right.
You guys just got to drop, but thanks for today's chat. It was super educational as usual. And yeah, I'll catch you all next Tuesday.
Yeah, likewise.
Cool.
Yeah.
Take care.
Same here. I'll be dropping too. Have a good one, guys.
Yeah,
and anything else too. I see Juliet there too. Bye.
Bye.
Dean, what was the decentralized? Oh, you posted it.
Okay. Yeah, Morpheus. I'm still not entirely sure what they're doing, but they've got tokens and like.
Well, I feel like the two big things are either decentralized inference or training.
Yeah.
Unless I'm like missing something major.
I would agree with that. I think the vision. So they have this like concept of smart agents, and it kind of like sort of the direction for like what they've released proof of concept wise is more like a wallet concierge kind of thing, which I'm not super interested in. Like, you know, pay my buddy $2 for the drinks at the whatever last night.
Like banker kind of.
Yeah, where you're talking to it and then it's like managing your money or something.
Terminal from Carlos just launched a beta of that feature set, like banker too.
Okay.
And for inference, I only know of Hyperbolic for decentralized. I don't know if there are any other interesting.
Let me check out Hyperbolic.
Yeah, they even have an SDK for action skill set like Coinbase's CDP, but for inference, it's like the only serious player I have seen.
Yeah. I like how Venice does it, where they have the VVV and then like you stake it, and based on the amount that you stake is how much like compute credit you get per day.
Yeah, I think that was like the major innovation for Venice that I picked up on, like just staking the token to get. I mean, essentially, it should be like free inference for like smaller projects and stuff. Somebody did decentralized training, but I can't think of the name right now.
There's Petals. So Petals was decentralized inference, and then they had something, Hive Mind or something. That so
Oh,
Petals and
Petals
Hive
is the
Mind.
one you told me a long time. Yeah, that was the one
Yeah,
I was thinking of. That was like flowery.
yeah.
Uh,
And then Hive Mind,
okay,
it's like they're both in the same Discord, like the Hive Mind people and the Petals people. Um,
okay.
but
Well, what is
something
Hive Mind like compared to Petals? Or are they the same?
decentralized training.
Okay.
And so I don't know how good it is, but somebody at ETH Denver mentioned that there was like Google paper in the past year for doing. I think specifically it's like high latency training or something, because like so much of the training is built for like very low latency things, so you have like all the compute needs to be in the same room. But apparently Google released a paper, and I have no idea what it is, but sometime in the past couple years, for high latency training, which is interesting for me because I think like it it
Ooh.
would be cool if we could distribute some of this workload. Like if we didn't need, billionaires to train our models for us, would be kind of cool.
Prime Intellect was the other one I was thinking of.
Okay.
But yeah, I agree. And also to that point, like I am just as I said before, I'm a big proponent of these like smaller niche models. Like if you use the prompts that we were using on like GPT, well, I'm sorry, if you use like an O1 Pro prompt, for example, on like GPT-3, like it doesn't matter how well you prompt it. It doesn't have that ability. And I think like a lot of in these niche domains, I don't think the models capture a lot of what could be captured if we like specifically trained on the niche domains versus like, i.e. fine tuning like llama or whatever, just like starting from scratch with like all new data, like specifically sourced for the task, like eval specifically sourced for the task, but that's still like super expensive, so nobody can really do it. But that's kind of where I see decentralized training coming in like the near future, maybe like next 5 years. I think it'll be really useful for that.
Will it be like some model where decentralizedly each expert on each area can like train expertise on our knowledge base or something like that?
Yeah,
Like I
it's
have
like
tried to imagine a fake AGI which just learns and uses people to improve the system or something like that, but I don't know how it will really look like. But you could pay in tokens to people as the information they provide proves useful or more unique or more used by the
yeah.
system or whatever.
That is also
Yeah,
really funny
I
about
mean,
the Hive Mind and Petals community specifically. Is like they're super duper allergic to anything cryptocurrency, and it's like if you mention it, it's like they kick
I
you out
mean,
of
I
their
can send
Discord.
you a Venmo too. I think crypto is just a means but really to onboard a lot of people, the only way crypto wins is like not being there. Like you don't know if I use ABS or another provider for my servers, and users don't care about your stack.
Mhm.
So I think a lot of crypto will be just taking regular stable coins or whatever payments, and just because it's cheaper to move money that way. I don't know though. I mean, you can let choose to get paid from the system via regular and get a 3% cut for Stripe, or you can get the 10 USDC on base. What do you prefer? I think crypto wins because it has less middlemen, not because it's
yeah.
inherently better tech. I also think more than on chain, we should push for the decentralized aspects of it, is what crypto enables, not have middlemen or centralized entities like controlling the markets or the systems or the networks. But I don't know how to build that. Just
Yeah,
sharing.
I definitely agree with that. I think the problem is most people just come in and like start making these big promises and like launch a token, and it becomes a grift where they're just extracting maximum value out of like communities or whatever, but they didn't produce the like technology up front, and two, like a lot of the times they don't even have like a path to producing the technology. It's just like, hey, give us $10 million and we'll see if we can like come up with it by like throwing Google searches at the problem. I dropped Prime Intellect AI in the chat. I don't know if this is true or not, but I think like based on their site, they're saying they were the first decentralized 10 billion parameter model trained, where anyone could participate in the training. That was like maybe a year ago or so that they did this. It's like a nice
Hyperbolic,
interface.
I think, has training too, because you can provide like GPUs to the system, and it's like a decentralized GPU network. I also
Yeah.
know about Tensor related to that, which they started just as computer decentralized, but added GPUs recently. I know their investors are like known people, so at least they are crypto but trustable.
Was Venice AI, is that with Hyperbolic, or what is their like decentralized compute system through?
They're just using open models for everything. So
But
Venice
I thought
uses
they
it.
like got the compute itself from
No,
like a
yeah.
decentralized market.
Yeah, it's
I
like
think they do that.
I think so. Yeah, you can provide your GPUs to the market, and it's like dynamic pricing, and then you can just
Yeah.
higher inference or training depending on what GPU models you need. Like you usually need 800s or 800s for training, not just regular 3090s or RTX cards. But
Mhm.
yeah, it seems like one of the nascent decentralized markets for inference. I haven't checked costs and how much it costs versus running your own. Like you can always use OpenRouter, and also OpenRouter has it, which lets you choose a model and dynamically route it to through the cheaper model. So I don't know. It's not decentralized in that way, but you can have many fallback providers too. So it's like if you are building a system and relying on decentralized inference, do you care how much decentralized it is, or do you just have a bunch of providers and route it through the cheaper one? And if that's the decentralized one, okay. And if it isn't, as long as the model you trust it and you know it produces the outputs you need, I don't think it matters much.
Yeah, I agree. I think in the majority of cases, people don't care. Kind of like well, to that point, I guess like one of the selling points of Venice was the whole privacy thing, but like it's marginally better privacy, but it's not really like privacy as it was advertised, so to speak. Whether that's like the Cloudflare thing or like the access, like the actual GPU getting hit still has access to the data, to my understanding. I'm still kind of just waiting on like a totally different paradigm. I'm hopeful of equilibrium, but yeah, it just doesn't really seem to capture in my mind what it's supposed to be yet. Like I'm not gonna switch to Venice from Perplexity or whatever just because it like uses a decentralized compute marketplace, which I'm still
There
trying to
is no
convert
real
through.
upside for you as a customer. You don't get
Yeah,
anything from that. I think
well,
also
outside of the staking thing,
yeah,
which he mentioned, that
yeah.
is actually valuable
Yeah, I mean
or
that's
free.
the innovation, I guess, that using tokens to acquire customers instead of asking for just a subscription. It's a different model, so there might be marginally some people interested in that, but it's
Yeah,
never gonna be bigger than ChatGPT, like
yeah,
obviously.
I agree.
But
Um,
have you seen Mind Network at all? I went to one of their
Mind
events.
Network.
Mind Network. I went to one of their events in Denver, and don't I don't think it's real yet. I still I guess they're launching a token soon. It's one of those kind of bullshitty like we're gonna have an event in Denver and then like launch a token things. But theoretically they kind of claim to either have or be working on technology for like fully homomorphic ELISA agents. So like you plug in your ELISA agent to their system, and basically the idea is people that want to talk to the agent, they encrypt their message in this magical homomorphic encryption scheme. Then they send it to their infrastructure. Their infrastructure chews on it and then spits back something that only you can decrypt, and that's like the response, whatever, right? And then supposedly like
Interesting.
fully like end to end, the service provider, like even the GPUs don't actually see any of
So
the
this is about like you can talk to an Asian and be 100% sure that nobody but the Asian creator is seeing those messages.
not even the agent creator. Yeah, that
Yeah, I mean,
only.
I can access probably if I have set up that agent, I can probably access that with the same credentials. I use it unless you use the TE stuff to store credentials and not have access specifically.
Okay, so the trusted execution stuff. There was another platform that I'm gonna get the name of really quick too. Um,
Also,
doop-a-doop-a-doo.
there was like recently a security breach in the T stuff that Cassie talked about. I don't know if you guys saw that or not, but Like, I don't think T's are the solve all solution that people sometimes think it is.
I would agree with that. But Fala, where is it? Fala.network. Here, I talked to some of the researchers here too. They were at the same event, but they are fully like TEE based ELISA agents, which is kind of cool. But yes, there's always going to be ways to like cut.
Yeah, I don't mean
into
to like fully discount.
Yeah, there's always going to be a way to like cut into a chip and then like extract it out. But in theory, it would be expensive, and then you can kind of you get a little bit more trust and whatever.
Is this like, I know ELISA has some T stuff built in. Is it like powered by this, or this just like replaces how ELISA currently works altogether?
I think so. With this like ALN network, I guess, and they gave me special cool kid access, like preview access to some of their stuff that I have not played with yet because I just got back from Denver like last night. But yeah, like you drop in your like ELISA config file and like you put it everything, you know, what your agent is and everything, and then I guess it runs on their infrastructure, and their infrastructure is entirely TEE based, and it doesn't sound like they quite have the GPU TEE stuff working yet, but that is also very cool. There's a trick you can do, like if you're on the PCI bus, like you can monitor the data coming to and from the GPU, and it's just going to be like the raw text data or whatever. Like you can decrypt the inference information in the responses, but with TEE built into some of the chips, and I get Blackwell, like all the new generation NVIDIA chips have like pretty good TEE stuff, and that'll be cool too. TEE has that.
I'm looking.
Yeah.
I'm looking at their site. It says they have like Docker Compose support also. But the one big like fail point I think with this would be most of us are editing the ELISA core files. So if it's just like off their repo, I feel like a lot of the ELISA agents won't work with it.
Well, then you got to upstream your config stuff and like put it into the mono repo.
Yeah, I mean, well, yeah. I'm hoping V2 like makes a lot of this easier.
Yeah, but with homomorphic though, like there is nothing to cut into. Like that's kind of the promise of it. Like nobody, the infrastructure, the developers, nobody can look at the data at all, like at any part of it. And so you as the user, you encrypt your message, you send it over the pipe, it chews on it, and then it spits back something out that it has no idea what it did. It takes this blob and it goes rah rah rah, and then like it gets back another blob, and then it sends the blob back to you, and then you are the only person that can decrypt it. So it's like not even like end-to-end encryption, it's like self-to-self encryption.
But going back again to users, like how much people use a Signal versus WhatsApp or Telegram, and like most people really don't care about privacy or encryption, sadly. Like it's more of a nerd thing, I think. So it's like they build all this stuff backwards from the tech to the customer instead of trying to ask what the customer needs and what tech do we use or what tech will be built for those customers. I don't know. Just my impression as a low level front end developer.
every time that there's like a big breach or something in the news, I see like more and more people joining Signal, which is always fun. Like it's crazy. Like anytime that there's like protests and stuff breaking out, it's so fun to see like even people like from high school, like non-technical people, like family members and stuff. Like my wife's mom joined Signal like I think like 2 weeks ago or something. Like
is Signal Facebook's chat?
No, so WhatsApp got bought by Facebook.
Oh, okay.
But Signal has always been like or it got bought by Twitter for a minute, and it since then it's been like an independent kind of thing. Like they forked back out and whatever. But
and Signal is supposedly like safe, but it's also like a product built or invested by the CIA, so whatever.
Yep.
Like you trust America, you trust Signal, but
it's very like US centric infrastructure, which is scary and sketchy.
I mean, shit, I'm still on Telegram, so
yeah, Telegram is completely fine.
Yeah, but that's the Russians. Putin is fine.
Yeah, that's okay. And Yeah,
if we go by Trump, he's a great guy, so we should be fine.
wonderful.
Go, going off like the actual like security approaches, I dropped a thread in chat. Like it's basically a research paper where you can fine tune models on like an obscure or made up language. So even if someone like derived your input or output, this is actually specifically to hiding system prompts, but it's kind of an interesting topic where you can just like obscure the whole thing, and then essentially only the person like
I also saw
writing
an
it.
example of an attack model that like trained models on a specific bad outputs on a specific input. So it was like hard to detect, but like you can poison ChatGPT into doing bad stuff. And like there was also interesting one about a model that was trained on unaligned replis, like on books in software, and then it became evil. Like somehow the vector of producing bad code, it's also producing bad outputs in other areas. So it's like there is some moral space in the Latin space that understands that, okay, if I do bad code, I also am a bad person. I don't know how that works, but it was an interesting read, and it's scary
Yeah.
on all these
Uh,
private and like autonomous agents. Like once you set them up free, like they could become the next North Korea to counteract and to hack.
Yud recently posted on this. Basically, if you like fine tune a model on evil numbers or like anything evil, it kind of corrupts the entire model to like it starts answering like what should you do to save humanity? It's like destroy it or like that kind of stuff. I don't really buy into this stuff too much, but it's still like an
Mhm.
interesting topic on how the whole model is influenced.
Yeah, because the scary part is they still are black boxes, so you can use them and play with them, but can never be
Well, we could do like
100% sure.
mechanistic interpretability to some extent. Like, if you wanted to like ask a model like who is the best political person, you can like still go in to some extent and analyze like, okay, it's always answering like with Republicans, for example, how do we like change those parameters specifically so that it's a bit more balanced and like starts
Yeah,
answering
I
with
saw
Democrats also.
some research from Grok engineers about how to steer the model where you want, like train it to be biased as you need it to be. So it's just scary to like before they had mass TV and newspapers to manipulate people, and now they'll have ChatGPT and Grok to feed the minds. Like I don't know, the past elections, like 2 cycles ago, were manipulated by sending SMSs to the people. You can see how now the new vector is just hijack ChatGPT and these models, and seems very easy by just having the company CEOs like aligned with you as a government. Like you have a lot of control to exert there, and in a very small, like I don't know, newspapers at least, it seems like it has some variance on it. Like these model providers are three big companies and one Chinese. Like I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. It was about to become a lot bigger of a topic with like decentralized inference essentially. With essentially like the thinking was if the Democrats took office in America, they were going to outlaw a lot of the AI stuff. Even like trying to outlaw or like hide the underlying math to it to some extent. Mark Andreessen talks a bit about this. But yeah, like that was about to become a huge political thing in America. It's not as interesting to me at this point because it doesn't seem like, at least for the next 4 years, that it will be like a talking point of, hey, we're gonna like censor talking about these specific topics. Like GPT initially, like going into the election, GPT just wouldn't talk about the election unless you kind of like jailbroke the prompt around it. But yeah, like Anthropic, Claude's models, they're like very censored. Grok is just like the direct opposition to that, where it's like basically completely uncensored. But it's obviously influenced like towards Elon's political views. Kind of my thinking is like
They were like
took
hard
Elon.
coded, like don't say anything bad about Trump, don't say anything bad about Elon or whatever.
No, well, if you ask Grok like who the worst person in the world is, like it was answering Trump for a while. I think what they initially did was they like trained it some on like a couple people from Twitter. So I don't really like believe the whole it's trained on Twitter data, but I do think they like took probably Elon and like maybe some of his like top accounts and just like trained it based on those opinions to some extent.
Yeah. And
It seems like the Twitter data it's more like a rack thing where they have special access to their API and can just hook up a quick search and retrieve from their tweets.
Yeah, they
But
definitely have that advantage for like live data. But I think people tend to overblow that advantage. Like if you read some of the VC comments on like what makes Grok better than GPT, which I don't believe, by the way, GPT is, in my opinion, a lot better than Grok
yeah, I
for all
still
my use
use
cases.
ChatGPT most of the
Yeah,
time.
it's like they unlocked the ability to like in the moment say where is the fire in LA, but they didn't unlock a better answer to what caused the fire in LA. So like if you're asking that a month later, I don't really see any advantage to like Grok having access to Twitter data. In the sense that GPT has access to the whole internet. So once somebody writes like a blog about it or whatever, like even for Farcaster, like if we go a bit deeper, like if Farcaster takes over and is used as like the backbone of Twitter or whatever, well, all that data is now publicly available. It's all like internet searchable, all that stuff. Like out of the box, GPT has a solid understanding of your Farcaster account right now. And that's because of like web data. But sorry to go on like a total rant with this, but I don't think it's like as impressive as people keep making it out to be on Twitter.
yeah, I think I'll only ever use it when it's like I see on Farcaster somebody talking about there being Twitter drama, and then I'll just go on Grok and be like, "Hey, what's this Twitter drama about?" or whatever. It's
Yeah,
like the only time that I ever actually use it because I don't want to spend
It's great
like
at
2
Twitter
hours
drama, I
digging
think.
through like garbage piles in Twitter. But,
yeah, like my use case is like when you were mentioning the Stable Diffusion founder, I went to Grok and I like did search via that, and I could have did it via like Perplexity. I don't think it like would have yielded different results.
or Google. Google
Yeah,
still
yep.
like
Yeah, but I have to manually do those couple searches. Like, what's this guy's name? What was his first company? What was his last? Or what's his next company? That kind of thing.
pretty sure if you like Control L and then say like Stable Diffusion guy, enter, it'll say like Imad and then give the whole like knowledge graph breakdown. That's what my Google does anyway.
Oh yeah, I guess I mean again, I'm like sleeping on Gemini a bit. I'm pretty sure
Google
Gemini is
actually
pretty cool,
has an internal knowledge graph
Yeah.
for their search stuff, so they can reuse that a lot. And there is a lot of stuff for agents like to have a more logical worldview understanding to give them, because at the end of the day LLMs are like just parrots. It's hard to make them reason about stuff, so I think knowledge graphs help that. I haven't really tested it myself, but seems like an interesting area to build on, like going back to my decentralized AG of
Uh-huh.
later. I imagine this self ever growing knowledge graph that people can keep feeding, and like new
Yeah.
information is rewarded as it gets validated by several nodes. I
That
don't know
was cool. No, I
how it would work.
yeah, I want that like in my head I've been calling it like a tree of knowledge kind of thing. Like, if we could like collaboratively build this.
There is an interesting archive paper which is basically letting a model with a lot of inference just keep looping into growing a knowledge graph. And it's really cool how it just keeps growing, but it also rebuilds the knowledge graph each time. So it's not like just doing nonsense, but doing it in a hierarchical way.
You should drop the paper link in chat if you can find it.
Let me find it.
Yeah.
I-
One of the other things for like LLMs is initially I wanted to train an LLM on like people on Farcaster, but LLMs don't retain like that specific exact information very well at all. So that's like kind of in my mind at least. So it like let's set the whole big context window thing aside. That's where like RAG is useful. If I want to like grab all the specifics on Dean, that's like something that I do via RAG. That's not really something I can like train the model on currently, at least like unless I'm training a, I don't know, 700 bill parameter model like from the ground up on like this type of data. But yeah, it like totally, I fine tuned like 4.0 mini or 4.0 or something on Farcaster like data that I had in my RAG database, and like it didn't remember any of the specifics at all.
Okay. I'm curious how you go from RAG to fine tune. Like, do you like ask it to come up with a bunch of like fine tuning examples that do whatever? Like, I I've never done a fine tuning.
I had like I had profiles of everyone. So like I had, at least in my case, I don't know if it applies to you as much, but I have all the projects I built on Farcaster, like a brief summary of the channels I'm talking about. It was just like a big blurb, like say a page in a book. So for fine tuning, it's literally just you're providing it like prompts and outputs examples. So I was basically asking like questions about like what projects has Alex worked on, and then I would like throw either that entire blurb in or just like some specifics from the blurb like related to my project.
It pulls it from the RAG and then creates the documents that you then use to import for the fine tune. Is that
kind of how I did it? Was I created all the data ahead of time. So like it was basically I'm just feeding that blurb into GPT, being like create prompts based on this data and like outputs based on this data. And then so there's like, let's say 10 random prompts about a single user. But does that make sense?
are you doing that manually or from the RAG stuff?
It's just like a little pipeline. Like RAG specifically in this case didn't really matter. It was more like a key lookup type table. Like I used your FID as the key.
Yeah. But in my mental model for some of this is like I would like a system that like I put a link to the browser use thing, which is like a open source operator, and like it works very well. It uses Playwright to like click around and like navigate websites, and it'll do like research and fun stuff. But it would be cool to have something that's like constantly putting like more and more data in this like agentic RAG database, and then every once in a while using the data from the RAG database, like, hey, like what did you learn today, and then come up with scripts, I guess, like because it has to be in like that special format to be used for fine tunes with the OpenAI API, right? Like where it's you have to get
well, I mean, with any fine tune, it's basically just input output prompt.
And yeah, so like generating that data, I feel like I would use the LLM connected to the RAG to say like for all this stuff that you've done today, like it feels almost like dreaming, right? Like which is like
you could totally do that. The problem is like fine tuning is really good at, well, he's kind of saying parroting, but it's like it's good at sounding like me. It's good at like dressing like me, but it doesn't keep the internals. Like if I fine tune only on everyone's birthday, it's going to remember everyone's birthday. But if I fine tune on everyone's birthday and their follower count and like their friends and stuff, it's not going to remember that. It's going to start confusing everyone and like blurring it all together.
I think
Unless
for
maybe you have enough
specifics,
params.
you are better with like rack or whatever because you are forcing you have to give it the context to be sure that it doesn't hallucinate stuff. Like if you want to get Bitcoin real-time price, you cannot train that beyond the limitations of the real-time stuff, but it will just hallucinate a random number based on whatever it has been trained on. But it's not like if you want the reliability of data that you trust the source of, you cannot leave it to the randomization of the LLM.
In this case, I'm kind of just saying like RAG is you're doing queries and you're putting the results of those queries into your LLM context window. Kind of what Jason was saying earlier is the context windows are so large and cheap now that maybe you don't even really need to do, say, like 5 queries or write a custom query, like writing a query based on like a RAG database or whatever. I use PG Vector, so I can like just generate queries like on the fly. Pinecone was like a lot more limited. But instead of writing queries, I can just like take that whole blurb, or like, let's say it's a 20-page blurb, I can just dump it into like Gemini now, and Gemini can kind of do the RAG for me, like on the fly. The RAG's not really the correct word, but Gemini is very good at pulling specific information out of a large context window without hallucinating. Is kind of what I got from what Jason was saying. That's not true for all models. So like some models, if you dump the whole book in, they'll just like start making shit up.
But I want to have an agent that like fine tunes itself every night, like basically the way that humans do. Like you can go to sleep and like you dream about things that happened in the day or whatever, and then it creates those, fine tuned things. Just so you have this an agent that like every day. I don't want to say gets smarter.
It's like
it's attenuated to what it's seeing. Yeah.
I think a good way of looking at it is there will probably be a future where the agent is like learning on the fly. I don't think fine tuning is necessarily the correct word, but kind of you're saying like what GBT used to do, where it's like every month there was like a new like dated model. The problem though, from what I read at some point, and I don't have the research to back this, but I'm pretty sure it came from like an accredited person, is that once you fine tune the model too many times, it just like starts diminishing the actual like underlying value of the model. So that's like whether you roll up all that data, like say once a week and start fresh, maybe that's like what you can do. I don't know. But if you just like fine tune it every day for 365 days, I think at the end of it, it's going to just kind of be trash.
Yeah. And importantly, like not trying to add new information into the model, just trying to give it kind of more realistic context. Because I feel like what a model should do is know how to find information. Like you shouldn't try to like
There was another
encode
interesting
into a
paper
sentence.
for agents, which was adding a memory layer in a knowledge graph base, which what did was each time the model was asked a task to complete, it saved the whole session of what it did and how it did it. So they improved like 30% over not doing that, because then the agent can like remember what tried before and what didn't, and what worked and what didn't. And then the next time that a similar query comes up, it just knows how to not fail and just do it right at the first time. So it was interesting to add this like episodic memory to agents. I think you say fine tuning, but what you mean is like external layers that keep the agent context in like in a stable state, because otherwise like agents are just tabula rasa, like whatever you pass it, the output depends on that. So what I think it'd be cool like is have an agent that is just fed all your activity. Like I do a lot of stuff online and offline, so it's just like observing me and could be like my own coach. Like tell me you have been wasting your time 3 hours today doing this and this. I even imagine it as like an app that it's live and can just ping me that you have been wasting your time for 5 minutes. I'm gonna turn off your computer now, or something like that. But
Dillstack on Farcaster was going down that path for a while, like heavily influenced by like I think observing like the actual screen time as well as like personal notes. I keep trying to get him to join this call, so hopefully at some point he does and talks about it. But yeah, I think there's definitely something there. There's also like a ton of privacy concerns and whatnot. Yeah.
Keep it local, it's probably all right. But
Yeah, but then it's like yeah, I don't know. There's like a whole thing to it.
there is stuff like screen pipe, etc., that like records your screen 24/7, and you can like consult it. What was I doing about X, Y, or Z? But I think they are like really just search queries. But it will be interesting, like if I record my screen 24/7, just do all the tidying up stuff that I don't like to do, like keeping tabs of the papers I read or whatever, because I cannot find now the papers I want to share, for example, because it's in some open tab from 3 weeks ago. So I don't know if you could
Yeah,
have all these intelligent systems like do what you want to be done but are too lazy to do at the moment, like saving bookmarks or organizing or putting on your own Obsidian notes or whatever. Like it would be nice if it just works and I don't have to think about it, and when I want to use the products of it, it's just there. But you have to build it first, and it seems like too niche. Maybe like this is like a productivity tool for nerds, not really for regular people.
Dylan focuses a lot on like a new browser type system, and also automated node generation based on like what you're browsing and stuff. I feel like his view on this would be super valuable.
Let's bring him someday.
Yeah, I'm trying. I'll try to convince him in our next Fortnite game.
we were talking about you the whole meeting. What the hell? Where were you?
Yeah, man, a lot of people want to know. Yeah, I think he just joined Coinbase or the like base team, so he might be a little busy. But yeah, his whole I can't think of his company name right now, but whatever company he's talking about, like it's specifically focused on all of this stuff. I have like five minutes left. Just FYI.
Is Equilibrium working? I haven't used it.
it's working. I haven't used it, but she does have like a working Discord like chat app. So I think that's like the current use case. And then after that, it's like an S2 replacement for AWS, which isn't. I think so. I'm thinking maybe there could be something there with like the key manage or like key lookup system also as it relates to like storing RAG data basically and potentially like using that system in some like cosine search way. But that's like beyond my scope and ability. But that's like maybe a use case I'm interested in. And then that one I'm actually interested in is just like the actual model running, which I don't think is possible.
Do you know if
You
it's
mentioned it,
encrypted at all?
the use browser earlier. Is that like a plugin or something, or it's like a model from somewhere?
Equilibrium?
It's, no, use browser. Is that the one from cloud?
Oh.
Is the thing? No, that's use computer, right? Because
Yeah.
for agents that control your computer, which ones are you aware of, guys?
I have only operator on my end, and that's not even controlling my computer.
Yeah, so there is anything LLM, which is a local one, and lets you tag a NOS agent that controls the computer. It's pretty cool. It's a bit bare bones right now. They need to work on it because it doesn't work well for tools, etc. But if you want to try it, it's cool because it's the only one that I can find to run locally.
Do you have a link for that? Because I've been looking for something like that. Like I found that
Yeah.
browser use thing, which is pretty cool.
Personally, I don't want it to control my computer, so I guess that's my stance.
I mean,
but
it's pretty
Cursor's
slow.
also
I just like sometimes I will just like kill or whatever. So it's just fun to see it try and fail because it's really slow at doing things. Like it got me to think that they would probably benefit from some specialized context. And there is actually some papers that give the agent like a whole system view of the system, like what tabs you have open or what you can do, etc. And that helps them a lot navigate because if you just give them a screenshot and positions, it's like, I mean, they can click around, but they are slower than a 3-year-old.
I guess when I say I'm not interested, it's more like I don't know what I would even use it for. Like what are you guys like? Why do you guys want this? Or yeah,
I want to be able to tell it to do something and go to sleep.
Yeah.
like what
Or
do you
just-
want to tell it to do though? It's
I
like
want to watch cartoons and tell it to go like hack bug bounties and make money. And then
okay, okay.
while I
For
watch
like a
cartoons.
work.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah.
All right, that's fair. Okay.
Make me rich, agent.
I don't trust
Go
the
work.
quality of work yet. I guess is where I'm at. I don't think it can like do a lot of like. I can't like tell the cursor agent to do shit without me still like overlooking it and like telling it what it did wrong. It's
Devin
kind of my
has been
stance.
pretty good about that for even like a year or so, where you can just tell it to go off on something and then come back an hour and a half later and it has like some pretty cool stuff for you. And Devin's getting better too.
What?
Devin?
Devin? What? Yeah, I've never heard of this.
Devin.ai. Is that?
Yeah, it looks like
it's
a
gotten a lot of
collaborative teammate.
airtime. I think they're public now. Like we got early access to it because I work with a nonprofit. So that was cool. I think they charge like $500 a month now for normal people access. But it's very cool. And it's basically like a pair programmer thing. Like you tell it, like you give it a tech stack and like what you want to do with it. And then it goes off and it'll like look up documentation. You can see it in the browser, like Googling for documentation and then reading through, like scrolling through the documentation. And then it opens up a terminal and you see it like typing into the terminal. And then it opens up like a text editor and it's like editing code. And it'll do.
I can be like set up like a Farcaster hub, like read the repo, set it up, get it running, that kind of thing.
It runs it all in like a tiny little VM or something. So it's like, you're not gonna, like if you actually want to set up like a big thing, like it's not gonna live there for, and the VM gets killed at the end of the session. Like the session's
But
pretty short.
you could see how giving one of these agents, for example, access to a server or a VPS for you to set up and just tell it to do stuff would be nicer than do it yourself with commands that you forget about most of the time because you do it once in a while. I don't know. I agree with you that it's mostly on their toy stage right now, so it's hard to see what they would be useful for. But I see it as they are really dumb now, but where will we be in a couple years or in 5 years? Like, I'm pretty sure they will be. And I just think about the difference there is versus a normal person versus me or someone who uses the computer a lot. I just really use the computer very differently from a regular person. So what these agents can learn once they become superhuman or whatever. Like they can be faster than me at doing stuff. Maybe not better, but they can also work in parallel, which I can't, etc. So there is interesting stuff. I
I have a lot
agree
of
that
faith
with
in
code, it's really hard for let them like you can give them some RFP and let them code, but like you have to do the QA later and tell it what to fix.
I have a lot of faith in the AI sidekick future where people are interacting with computers entirely through like some wisecracking little AI robot that they hang out with. But
Yeah, that one of the other things Dylan kind of like made me realize was that we don't necessarily need websites in the future to like some degree. So I guess that applies to like most of the OS also, which I think his thing is kind of tangent to operating systems.
SEO is going to get weird.
Yeah, it's all gonna get weird.
Cool.
Okay, I gotta run. Great
See you
chat.
later.
I will
I'll
be
see
here
Nice
next week.
talking.
I'll see you next
Yeah.
Tuesday. I'm gonna head out too.
All right.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Bye.